Vishy Anand cruised into the semi-finals by dispatching Ivan Sokolov and looked to be the clear favourite for the tournament, as he was the only one of the gang of four left remaining. However, life wasn't so simple. He had a very good position against Alexey Dreev in the first game, but blew it and went one down. He would have to win game 2. Anand opened with his favourite pawn to e4, and Dreev played his super solid French defence. And Anand played the pragmatic pawn to d3. Then came d5, knight d2. So it looks as though we're going to get a King's Indian attack kind of position. The knight came to f6, then knight to f3. And now Dreev played an idea of his friend Bereyev. He played his pawn to b6, a little bit unusual. The idea obviously to bring the bishop out to b7 or sometimes a6 at a very early stage. Now the normal move to play a King's Indian attack would be the pawn to g3. But Anand exploits the fact that the b6 square has been taken up by a pawn. And he played the pawn to e5. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So the knight dropped back to d7. Then he played the pawn to d4. Well, you might say that white has just lost a tempo here because it's a normal French type structure, but instead of playing the pawn to d4 in one move, he's played it in two. But here the difference is that after pawn to c5, c3, black is unable to increase the pressure against the d4 pawn by playing the queen to b6 because, of course, pawn on b6 takes away that square, so that white's centre here is absolutely secure. So, although he's lost the tempo, it doesn't matter. This is in fact how the game continued. Now, Dreev just plays bishop to e7. Now came bishop to b5. An interesting idea. This is preempting black's idea of playing bishop to a6, exchanging off this supposedly bad piece, bishop on c8. Because after bishop a6, which is what occurred in the game, Anand played the pawn to a4. And the problem for black is that after this exchange, bishop takes bishop, pawn takes bishop, it's actually very difficult to develop this knight. And if something like pawn to a6, well, of course, white doesn't have to exchange off the pawn because there's the pin with the rook on a1, down to the rook on a8. Dreev instead retreated the bishop to b7. It's all very strange, this manoeuvring of the bishop, but he wants to try and prove that the pawn on a4 actually weakens white's queenside. Anand castled. At this stage he was playing his moves so quickly. In the first game, although he'd built up a very good position, at the critical moment he appeared a little bit hesitant. But in this game, he was just rattling out the moves. He'd obviously decided just to play very quickly, just to try and blow his opponent off the board, just play by instinct. Knight c6, rook e1. We'll see the point for that in a moment. Dreev played the rook to c8. He's hoping to get some pressure on the c-file. Now we see one of the reasons behind playing the move rook e1. Anand played his knight to f1. Not only just preparing to free the bishop on c1, but also swinging the knight round to g3 and then maybe into h5. I think Dreev's next move was questionable. He decided to close the position with pawn to c4. The problem is that this gives Anand so much security that he's able to build up a strong initiative on the king side. Black's queenside play is simply too slow. So the knight came to g3. And now Anand would like to play the knight into h5 at some point. I think what Dreev was trying to do by playing the pawn to c4 was cut the bishop on b5 permanently out of the game. Well, eventually, of course, white must give up this bishop for one of the knights on the queen side. And of course, this bishop is one of white's best attacking pieces, but it doesn't really matter. White still has plenty of pieces attacking on the king side. If black castles here, then it's a lot of fun for white to play this position. He can build an attack slowly on the king side. perhaps advancing the h-pawn. One idea might be to play the knight into h5 at some point. Another idea, perhaps pawn to h3, knight back to h2, and then to bring the queen into the game. So instead of casting immediately, Dreev decided to keep his king in the centre, which is possible because the central pawn structure is closed. Played the pawn to h5 to try and stir up a bit of trouble, kick out the knight on g3. And then Anand switched sides. He went back to the queen side and played the pawn to b4. Well, the idea of this is that if black doesn't capture the pawn with pawn takes pawn en passant, which is what Dreev did, if he leaves the pawns as they are, then it's going to be impossible for black to break open the position. For instance, after pawn to a6, bishop takes, bishop takes. The position on the queen side is absolutely closed, so it's possible, it gives white a free hand on the king side. For instance, if b5, then a5, or if a5, then b5. White just keeps the position closed, whatever. Dreev wanted to keep some play on the queen side, so he captured en passant, and recaptured, and then knight to a5. Now it looks as though black has a little bit of counterplay, because at least he can use the c4 square. But it's just not enough. It's very difficult to develop really any meaningful play here, because I think the window of opportunity, the window of attack for black on the queen side is too narrow. The knight came into c4, but Anand dealt with this very easily by playing his knight back to d2. The h-pawn advanced, that was the knight retreats, and it moved on again. So Anand kept the position closed by playing the pawn to g3. Now, having just weakened the king slightly, Dreev wanted to open the long diagonal. So he played his pawn to a6. And surprisingly, Anand didn't mind. He captured the knight and did open up the long diagonal for that bishop. And at first I thought that was a really strange decision. But in fact, there's no way that black can exploit the fact that the diagonal is opened, because his pieces are in such bad positions. Look at that knight on d7. Because of the central pawn wedge e5, d4, that knight really can't move anywhere decent. There's only one good piece in black's position, and that's the bishop on b7. And that's not enough. White has a tremendous space advantage here. Anand blocked the diagonal immediately by playing the knight into e4. And now he has a clear threat. He wants to play his bishop to a3, exchange off those bishops, and then next move he'll be ready to move his knight into d6 with check. And in that position, well, black would simply have to exchange off the bishop for knight, and then white would be left with a tremendous space advantage. Black would have absolutely no compensation for it. Dreev realised that the time was right to get his king out of trouble, but this didn't really help him that much. That h-pawn is a little bit weak now that the rook has moved away. So queen to e2. Dreev advanced on the queen side. He desperately needs a decent square for that knight on d7, so the knight wants to come round to b6, then maybe into d5. And exchanged. Pawn takes b5. And now queen g4, so he's just ready to pick up the pawn on h3 and get his king out of any danger. But Dreev is a tough customer. He wasn't giving up. Although Vishy is threatening some pretty nasty stuff on the king side, he decided to ignore it and just develop some counterplay on the queen side. A good practical decision for speed chess. He played the pawn to b4, so he's just trying to get a passed pawn on c4 and to weaken the pawn on d4 as well. Now the problem with that is that it allows bishop to h6, forcing g6, and white can simply take a rook. But Dreev realised he had to do that to create some counterplay. It was a good practical decision. In fact, Vishy decided not to take the rook. He thought it wasn't worth giving up the bishop, which is a great attacking piece, for the rook, which wasn't really doing very much at all. He decided to bring his knight, which was on the back rank, not doing very much at all, into the game. He played his knight to d2, and after Dreev captured on c3, instead of playing knight takes c3, he just brought the knight into the attack with knight to f3. White has a simple idea. He wants to play the knight into g5, the queen to h4, move the bishop, and then queen h7 checkmate. This forced Dreev to exchange off his beautiful bishop on b7 for the knight on e4. Bishop takes e4. Anand recaptured, rook takes e4. And now he created a diversion to Anand's attack on the king side by playing the pawn to c2, which can be very irritating indeed for white. Anand took no chances and blocked the pawn. Rook to c1. Now rook b8. So Dreev is finding some counterplay here. If rook takes pawn, then rook check is annoying. Anand took no chances and retreated the rook to e2 so that he can safely mop up the pawn on c2 without allowing a check on the back rank. It's possible the rook on e4 would also be a little bit out of play, so this is a good regrouping. Dreev realised that Anand was about to capture the rook on f8 as his counterplay on the queen side was being prevented, so he moved the rook. Then queen takes h3. That's a very nice pawn to get rid of because now white's king is more secure. It has the g2 square to come to. But Dreev wasn't giving up. Rook b3. So queen g4 defending the knight. Queen a8 attacking the knight. King g2. And rook d8. Rook takes pawn on c2. And knight b6. Well, white is pawn up here, but this is not an easy position to win because this pawn on c4 gives black reasonable counterplay. Also, the queen on a8 is quite well placed, and the rook on b3 is very active. So this is still extremely tricky. But Anand plays with great energy here and proves that in fact his attack is still alive. Played his rook to e4. It's just blocking out this pin. Queen a4. And now bishop g5. That's crucial. Exchanging off the bishop on e7, which protects all these dark squares around the king. Knight d5. Bishop takes. Knight takes. And now black's pieces, the queen on a4, the rook on b3, just look completely out of play. They're nowhere near the king, which is where the action is taking place. Vishy just crashed in with knight g5. After knight f5, queen h3, look at black's king. He needs an h-pawn to play pawn to h5, which would keep him in the game, but here there's no chance of that. Queen h7 check is threatened, so Dreev was forced to play the rook to d7, protecting the pawn on f7 so that after queen h7 check, king f8, there's no mate on f7. And in fact, there's no clear win for white here. For instance, queen h8 check, king e7, queen f6, king just comes back to e8. Okay, perhaps you can take on e6, but it's not absolutely crushing. White has plenty of other tries which look pretty reasonable, but nothing really clear-cut. So Anand thought for a few moments here and came up with a beautiful move that really completely destroyed black's defences.
Well, Anand now stopping to think. Dreev fighting mightily. Again, this guy just won't die. And he has almost no time in the clock. 3:24 left.
There's also actually, you can go for queen h7, king f8, queen check, king up, and then you've got knight h7. That's also possible.
And then on rook d8.
Rook d8, queen f6. It's not completely over.
It's not obvious.
Okay, so the immediate knight h7 and into f6.
Boy, this guy Dreev, it looked as if he was totally dead. And now Anand looking at the clock, not a good sign at all, considering that he has such a huge advantage. There's no reason to be looking at the clock now. He needs to just play a move.
He's played d5, right, so if now rook takes d5, the f7 pawn is hanging, so the threat to take on e6.
Oh, that's a fabulous move. And if he plays pawn takes, if he were to play pawn takes, then check in e6 looks deadly. I mean, that looks lethal.
Okay, pawn takes, queen check, king across, pawn down to e6, well, the whole position caving in. There's also another threat, rook takes c4, and it's over.
He's also threatening d6 and caging the king in. There's plenty. He has to take that pawn.
He's
got to take the pawn. He's got so many moves now. D5.
It's all over.
Oh, that's a beautiful move.
Fantastic. It's all
pure class move. That one.
The whole position just caving in. And
great.
Dreev now 2:34 left.
Having to calculate all these moves with only 2 minutes on your clock.
There's too much.
Oh man, Anand knowing that the kill is there, ready and waiting to land the hammer blow in d5. What a beautiful move. Capping an excellently played game, and the Pentium is going crazy, saying White has a 4.0 advantage in this position after that move. It is convinced, the computer is convinced anyway, and now he's just taking on d5. There's got to be umpteen different ways to kill the guy now.
He's played queen h7, and now surely e6.
Another
he's
check,
checked.
king up, another check.
King back, and then e6.
Ooh, that's just going to be ugly.
Okay, so king back, and then surely e6. It must be all over.
Woo, e6 is just boom. What? I'd love to play that kind of move, boy. That's the kind of move you just glorify and playing. Look at this move. It's just tremendous.
If pawn takes, then captures on f7, king to the side, then queen mate.
This is all mate. This is over. This is done. You can expect resignation now. He's just pawn takes is just
pawn takes. And if rook takes, queen check, king across, knight mate.
King is killed by the knight and the queen. This is over. What a sterling performance by Anand in a must-win situation. And Dreev just looking at the clock, looking at the position. His time, he's got 123 left. If there was any fight left in this position, at least the time would kill him. Even if he had some moves, he would just lose on time here. So an overwhelming victory by Anand. It's just a question of time. The clock ticking down. Dreev wanting to sit and analyze, but the clock will prove his undoing in the long run. In this case, in the short run. Only 59 seconds left. This is just he's shaking his head. I'm sure just being wiped out like this has got to be strange. Just being crushed. He's blown off the board.
Well, the whole game just superb from Anand.
This is like Tyson McNeely. I mean, he just lined up on him and just beat him up. It's incredible. Superb. It's incredible. And he's resigned. Magnificent performance by Anand. And we're on to the Blitzkrieg.
Hi, this is Grandmaster Damian Lemos. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to receive more free chess videos from us, you can just click the subscribe button below. I would also highly recommend signing up for my free mail course, the 10 Grandmaster Secrets to Dominate Chess. During this exclusive course from onlinechesslessons.net, I'll share with you my own Grandmaster shortcuts to effective attacking, defending, and growth hacks to improving your chess without complicated books or memorization. So sign up by clicking the sidebar on the right, and I know you won't be disappointed. Once more, this is Damian for onlinechesslessons.net, and I'll see you in my videos. Thank you.